friends. I don't know anybody had more friends than they did. And the old thing about visiting the sick and burying the dead, I don't know anybody that did it more than they did. They were always at the hospital or funeral home for any number of people. And of course, Mother can't do it quite as much as she used to, but she still does. But my recollections of Dad in particular were that he was a very fair and honest person, and very easygoing. Although sometimes when he'd bring out that old stick, he didn't really hit you, but he'd get your attention. I really remember when we were young, he had a buggy whip, long stick thing with a little whip on the end of it, and we were all upstairs, and of course, you know how kids wrestling around and go on, especially during the children's hour, we're supposed to be in bed. He'd come up the steps and you could hear him, but you'd see that whip before you'd see him, because it was ahead of him, But and he'd pop at you, but he wouldn't hit you hard, but it got your attention, But he was always very, very fair and honest about everything, and somebody that you could counsel in, and just good dad. He liked to hunt. He liked to smoke. He liked to work. I think he particularly liked to work in his garden, especially after he retired, and looked like the wrath of God. He had some of the worn out his clothes, and he looked like a farmer didn't have a nickel to pour out of the pot, but that was him. He just liked that. But he wanted to treat everybody the same, and he did, but it wasn't to the extent of being fair or not taking into consideration things that needed to be. Just was a good dad.
I think Daddy was so colorful, and some of his expressions were hilarious. And one time, Dick Campbell was in Owensboro, and he said, Daddy said, I was giving a speech at Brescia, and he said, I lost my place. And he said, Dick, it was so quiet. He said, it was so quiet you could have heard a mouse fart. he was always coming out with these things. I wish I could think right now, but I just haven't. And he had different names for all the grandchildren, Horsefly, and one time Dick Atkins said, John, I give you $5 if you can name everyone with their real name. And he couldn't. He had them all just Debbie, tuna fish, catfish, 4, and I just can't remember. But anyway, that's about all that. So we were just, he was so loving and he was strict, but we still could get around him. That's about all.
Okay. Well, let's see. Probably of all the kids, I was the one around him the most, in that I worked at the plant since I was a young kid. In fact, I used to go down and mow grass when I was 10 or 11 years old, and so I was with him, my dad, every day, clear up till I guess I was 23 when we moved out of Owensboro. So I'd have lunch with him every day, and he was pretty much in charge of buying all the bottling supplies, and I worked in bottling most of the time, and so he and I would have a lot of conversations about the needs at the bottling plant. He was at work every day, opposed to his brothers who didn't come every day, but he was always there. He wasn't Mr. Medley down there, he was Mr. John. That's all everybody called him everywhere in Owensboro I ever went with him. He had meetings at the Central Bank and Trust back then. He was on the board, and I know when we'd go in the bank for something, it was always Mr. John, never Mr. Medley, as you would think most people do call people by their last name. He had a big heart. He'd spank you, and 5 minutes later he's in hugging on you. Funny thing, I remember once he was at St. Stephen's. We all went to Mass every day of the year, and he used to go to confession about every day. He came out on the porch one day, and one of his friends says, John, you go to confession every day. And he said, damn it, I have to. So I thought that was kind of funny, and he liked to hunt, and just work and fish. That's about all I can say. I'm sure there's 100 more things I could go on talking about, but I believe that's about all we have.
You know, Big Daddy was probably as kind-hearted person as you could find. I don't believe anybody could have had a better father. Kind of makes you want to tear up. You know, stories, things that happened. You know, of course, I remember many a whipping, and many that I should have had and didn't. I remember one time climbing in the window late at night when I should have been home. I was climbing through the utility room window. There was a doghouse there, and I'd stepped on that, and I was halfway through, facing down, and suddenly I saw these legs. But he never told Mother, and he never did anything to me. I can remember one time going hunting with him. This is when I was real young. Probably the first time I was at a shotgun. He never told a soul about that, but we were sitting there, and he, because I guess I was new, he was making me sit close to him with the gun. And I guess, of course, I didn't know what I was doing, and I accidentally fired the gun. And it must have been, I'm surprised it didn't hit him in the foot, but it didn't, just right beside him. He didn't flinch or anything. He just, you know, kind of told me I should be careful, and I was just kind of devastated. I thought, my God, I tell you, I learned something there, though. I knew where the safety was from then on, and I never did it again. Gosh, there's so many things. One thing he always said when you talk to him, you had a problem or something, you talk to him about it, he always say, saw wood.
What does that mean?
Well, he says, you know, just kind of wait, let things take their course and don't get all shook up, just saw wood. I guess one thing you'll remember, because it happens so often, is the way when he'd wake you up in the morning. Sometimes if you didn't get right up, you might get some water on you. He had a water gun one time. He came around and squirted everybody to wake him up.
He keep peace with all the brothers, and you all fight.
Oh yeah, you know and you know, when during the day when we do things wrong, a lot of times Mother would. We wouldn't get a spanking or anything from her right away, especially when we got older, because sometimes she'd spank you and you'd try to keep them laughing. But when he'd come home at night, we'd sit down at the dinner table and she still wouldn't say anything. You'd think you'd gotten through with it, you know, gotten away with whatever it was. And after dinner, then she'd bring it up. And then, you know, he may have taken 2 or 3 of us in the utility room, and you know, we'd do the big circle. He'd hold our hands and whip us as we'd all go in a circle. Gosh.
How about in his final days? Was that rough?
Yeah, it seemed just lay there, and he didn't seem to be in a lot of pain. Hopefully he wasn't. Yeah, no, that was kind of a rough time, especially you know, in the hospital that last day. We all came back to the hospital that night after I didn't get there. You know, by the time I got there, he'd already died. Mother had gotten there quick. She somehow knew. But in the other room, we were talking about the rosaries that the family had, and I remembered one story and I wanted to tell. One night, we were all sitting around saying the rosary, and we got through, and Mother said, you know, everybody wasn't being serious enough, she was going to do it again. So we proceeded to say a second rosary. And we got through with that, and she decides that we still weren't serious enough, and she says, we're going to do it a third time. And my father turns around and looks at her, and he says, God damn, Cecilia. Needless to say, we didn't say that third rosary. That's it.
Big Daddy was a very patient person, a very kind person. And I think that's one thing, that a big gift that he's given to all of his children, because with my grandchildren, you can ask any of them, what is Gaga's rules? That's what they call John now. Is you must be patient and you must share. And that came from his observation, and of course, the way we were raised, my husband's observation. And that's basically the biggest gift I think that Big Daddy gave all of us and his grandchildren.
We had to have patience with
That's
all
right.
you all.
And he was a very patient man, very kind. And that's basically what I wanted to tell you about him. A
Great.
wonderful man. And he was a very good grandfather. He would tease them, he'd be gruff, but they weren't afraid of him. They loved it. So that's what I feel about Big Daddy.
I went horseback riding with Big Daddy on Saturdays sometimes. And one time when we were coming home, he said, "Do you know how to drive?" I said, "Oh yeah, sure. Drive all the time." Well, in truth, the only thing I'd ever done was back the car out of the garage. So I got in and started driving. He put the seat back and was going to take this little rest on the way home. I think I hit every curb, and he's just very calmly, he just sat there and, don't worry about it. Just try to keep it right in the middle of those two lines. And he just sat there just as calm as he could be. I drove all the way home, but that was the first time I ever drove, and he helped me. And the other thing that comes to mind is when my husband Joe first met Greg and Big Daddy. We'd been out to dinner with him, and then Joe and I went to a party, and then when Joe was bringing me back to the hotel room, we were walking down the hall, and he's going, "What is that noise? What is that noise?" I started laughing. I said, "It's Big Daddy snoring." So, that was Joe's first, meeting of Big Daddy's snoring. But when we come home at night, if Big Daddy was snoring, we knew we weren't in trouble if we were past curfew. So, those are just a few.
I went for a ride with Big Daddy in the Sterling truck once, and it was quite the experience. We were at the intersection of Old Hartford Road and Veach Road, and there was a car coming, and he just was about to pull out, and I'm like, "Big Daddy, stop!" This was after a bunch of little incidents like that, so it was really kind of scary. But we got home and we weren't killed, so I was happy about that. And let's see, another time. Oh, I have another one. One time I was over and Ben was taking a shower, and we were sitting around the table, and Gran decided it was time to say the rosary. And so one of the grandkids was here. Gran and the grandkid go into the living room, and they're waiting for us, and Big Daddy's just kind of dragging us out, and we're talking, and finally the grandkid comes in and says, "Big Daddy, Gran says you've got to come on now." And he turns to me and he goes, "If I have to go, you're going too." So off we go, and we get in there, and Gran's kneeling down. Little kid, I can't remember which grandchild, is also kneeling, and she prays, "Hail Mary, full of grace, like that, and Big Daddy's, "Holy Mary, Mother of God," like it's the most boring thing he's ever done. And I'm trying not to laugh because, I haven't known these people very long, and I want to be really pious, but he is cracking me up. So that was pretty funny. And then when we were in college, there was this friend, Marilyn Misrell, who is now Marilyn Pace, and we had a tendency to make big long banners out of meat paper when it was someone's birthday, or we'd make tacky ones and hang them in people's yards. And on Ben's birthday once, we decided we'd make a big one and hang it right across the front of the house. So we talked with Danny, I think, and anyway, we had some semblance of an idea when Big Daddy went off to work, and we tried to time it so that he would be gone. And so we're on the front porch, and we're, putting this sign up, and all of a sudden the little blue car goes to the end of the driveway. It stops. It backs up. And here he comes out with that little whistle that he always did. "Girls, what are you doing?" Looking over those glasses. And we said, "Well, it's Ben's birthday. We're doing a sign for him." "Well, okay, fine." And he goes back in the house. And the next thing we know, Gran's back, and she goes, "Girls, do you need a hammer?" Like we're gonna, knock it into the side of the house. But it was a fun morning, and I think Ben was surprised when he saw his little sign.
And I guess that's it.
I don't know what to say. What I remember about Big Daddy was he was always large and in charge. He was the head of everything, and the family. He was definitely the main man. What he said went, except what Mother said. But he was, I guess, somebody that was a good role model for everybody. He was generous. He was a good businessman, a good father. He was all those things. And he'd spank us pretty good if we needed it too. Doing the Big Daddy dance where he had to hold one hand and buggy whip in the other, walking in circles around us.
Being the baby of the
Being a baby of the
kids.
family, the only one I could whip was a dog. Everybody else could whip me. Some of the things that we did, like going hunting. I remember being his bird dog before I could hunt, and then you really learned more about hunting watching him than he didn't really put the gun in your hand, tell you do this, do that. But he was a real good shot. In fact, so good I can remember hunting with him one time when the game wardens showed up, and I didn't know they were game wardens. I had no idea. They just came over and started talking, and they were asking about how many doves that guy have, how many doves that guy have, and they pointed to Dad and said, how many doves? He said, I said, I imagine he's got his limit or better by now. And meantime, Johnny knew who they were, and he walked out to the center of the field and gathered up a bunch of Daddy's doves and walked back over to where he was sitting. When they got over there, he killed about 3 or 4 while they were sitting there talking to me, and they got over there and he hit just exactly his limit. So he was a real good shot. It was, most everything he did, he was pretty good at. Kind of special that way. I don't know what. I know something that's funny, and you probably have heard this from some of the others, but we used to say the rosary every night. Every night of the world, we said the rosary. And if we had friends over, whether they were Catholic, Jewish, Baptist, didn't make any difference. They knelt down and said the rosary after dinner. And Big Daddy would lead the rosary. And he usually had a fly swatter in his hands. And he might start into the Hail Mary, and he'd say, Hail Mary, full of grace, and look over, and one of us was kind of not sitting down on our heels. And he'd take that fly swatter and smack you on the butt and say, kneel up, goddammit, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou, and go on with it. So it's kind of funny, but, it's just one of those things I can remember about him. It was kind of funny, but it didn't make any difference who you were. You knelt down with us and said the rosary. If you stayed for dinner, you were stuck afterwards. And we went to church every morning in the world, too. And I don't care if you killed somebody the night before you went to communion because you didn't want to get grilled by him about why you didn't go. So that's kind of nutshell there. I don't really have anything else to offer you.